Thank you so much, Professor Coleman. I was in tears. I don't know about all of you, but that was beautiful. Thank you, Professor Coleman, again. Our next speaker for tonight is, okay, before I say that, people who are standing at the back can come up in the first 3 rows and sit down over here. Our next speaker for tonight is Rameen Aryanpur. Rameen is a master's student at the School of Mechanical Engineering at Tufts. And Rameen is going to talk to us about the exciting possibilities of quantifying ourselves.
So, I'm not Superman, I can't sing, but hopefully I can keep you entertained. I want to start out by playing a game. So, I'm going to play a few sounds, and if you recognize the sounds, I want you to raise your hand. Right? So, here's the first one. Alright, here's the second one. And the last one. Alright, so those are all sounds that most of you recognized. And I think the reason for that is because those are the sounds that you heard as you interacted with technology over the course of the last 10 years or so. And if we think about where technology has been, it's really pretty fascinating. I mean, just 10 years ago, it was normal for a song to take 2 days to download over the internet. Just 8 years ago, YouTube didn't exist. And just 5 years ago, the first iPhone had just been introduced. So clearly things are changing extremely quickly. And we're oftentimes left wondering, well, what's coming next? Well, today I want to pull back the curtain a little bit and maybe give you a glimpse into what might be coming next, and especially how that can help improve us. But first I want to tell you a story. So every year, like most Tufts students, I go home for winter break. And a few years ago, my cousin and I decided it would be hilarious to try and get my grandma to use Facebook. So I love my grandma. She's one of the sweetest people in the world. She's awful with technology. I once left my laptop out on the kitchen table. She thought it was a cutting board because there was an Apple logo on it. We signed her up for Facebook, and we start telling her it's all about uploading photos, and it's all about connecting with old friends, and she's listening the whole time, and finally at the end, she asks one question. She says, well, what if you don't like to share? Well, what if you don't like to share? I mean, the internet as we know it today is all about sharing. It's not only what we like to do, it's also what makes the most money. And there are all sorts of companies like Facebook and Twitter that have really capitalized on this and built some really useful tools for us. And again, they're all about sharing generally parts of our social lives. But what about the things we don't like to share, like our private lives? Now, I'm not talking about Match.com, but what I am talking about are the things that we do on a daily basis, the activities that we do that define who we are. So for example, how much do we exercise? What things do we eat in a day? How do our moods fluctuate over the course of an afternoon? All of these things are equally important in defining who we are. And is there a place for them on the internet? Well, I believe that there is, and there are many people who feel the same way. And it's all part of this idea called the quantified self. So the quantified self is all about tracking information about your daily activities and then looking at them over time to figure out what makes you tick, what your habits are, and then make improvements off of the things that you observe. And I believe that the quantified self really breaks down to one simple thing, and that's observation. So without observation, we can't improve. Observation is the key to improvement. And I think there are all sorts of examples that there are all sorts of examples that pop up in our lives there are all sorts of examples of that pop into our lives. So when I was 12 years old, I was absolutely 100% certain of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. I was going to be a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, my all-time favorite team. And so, yeah, I saw that. My all-time favorite team. And so one year I came back to Little League after being away for the winter, and I couldn't pitch at all. I was totally wild. And I went to practice one day, and my coach said, all right, I'm going to stand here, I'm going to watch you pitch. And he said, I'm going to play a game. If you hit the tree over there was a tree off in the distance, I'll do 10 push-ups. If you miss the tree, you have to do 1 push-up. And for me at the time, being 12 years old, doing 1 push-up was terrifying because this is what I looked like. And just for good measure, that's also what I looked like. I'm not quite sure how I fit a baseball hat on top of that head, but somehow it worked. So he says, I'm going to watch you throw a pitch. I throw a pitch, and I miss the tree completely. So I, do a beached whale, and I do a push-up. I get back up, and he says, all right, now I want you to loosen your right shoe. So I loosen my right shoe, and I pitch, and I hit the tree. And he says, do it again. So I do it again, and I hit the tree again. And I said, what did you do? And he said, well, I could tell by how you were pitching, just by watching you, that you were pivoting improperly off of your right foot. And because of that, you were pitching wildly. And so it turns out actually that over the course of the off season, my right foot had grown to be half a size larger than my left foot. That's actually still something that plagues me today. So the moral of that story is that oftentimes other people can see in us what we can't see. We just need someone to observe. And I think that really what that breaks down to is that we're wired to forget as humans. So by a show of hands, how many people can tell me what they did last Wednesday? Give me a second to think about it. All right, 3 or 4. What about the Wednesday before that? All right, a few, right? Well, most of you can't. And it's not because you don't want to remember that stuff. It's just that we always forget. We're always charging forward. But what if as we were charging forward, we could have technology that automatically kept track of all of those things that are so important to defining who we are? So how much we exercise, the things that we eat, how much we sleep. What if we could use all of that information to then build up this sort of quantified self-representation online? If we have all that data, you can imagine there are all sorts of possibilities of what we could do with it. So most tough students look like this during the week, right? Completely stressed out, completely sleepy, and everybody has very different sleep patterns. I know I sleep around 7 hours a night during the week, and I hate taking naps. There are people who swear by taking naps. And I think, though, if I could have data that tracked how much I slept, and I knew that if I took a nap, I would feel a lot better later on in the day, and I would be more productive, then I would be way more likely to actually take that nap. So I could really improve the way that I live. Another example, let's say that you want to lose 5 pounds. Let's say that you've been trying really hard to lose weight and you just can't do it, right? You've tried all sorts of diets, you've tried all sorts of exercise, you've pretty much tried everything. Well, like most people, you're probably going to respond differently to diets. You're going to respond differently to certain forms of exercise. There's no one all-encompassing thing that can make you healthy. But what if you could have all of your data that pertain to your exercise and your lifestyle habits, all of that online? And then all of that data could automatically be compared to other people who are just like you. So age, gender, location, maybe even ethnic background. And you could get suggestions based off of what worked for them when they were trying to lose weight. We could really get a lot more, we could generate suggestions that would be a lot more effective. And that could really help not only on a small scale, but also on a larger scale. So you can imagine that as we start collecting this data, then we can start looking at not only the smaller picture, but the larger picture. So we could start looking at societal trends. We could start flagging things that actually cause diseases. We could get a much better understanding of the habits that actually cause people to end up a certain way in life. You can imagine going to your doctor and instead of them asking you how many sodas you drink in a day, or them asking you how much you sleep, you could actually take a look at all of that data. And you could look at it over time, and you could compare it to all the people who are your age. And they could say, listen, based on what you do, this is probably where you're going to be in 10 years. It would be really powerful to have a visualization of all of your personal health data and all of your quantified self data. So this may seem like a pipe dream, but there are all sorts of companies that are working on this. And they're not only working on the software solutions, they're working on the hardware solutions. So a software solution is like a website where you keep all of this data. A hardware solution is something like a small device. So you can imagine a device that is no larger than the size of this AA battery here that clips on your waist, and it keeps track of all of your sleep, it keeps track of your heart rate, it keeps track of all sorts of information, and automatically observes for you, and then pushes all that information online. And those are actually devices that exist today that you can buy. I believe that technology is at its best when it's helping people. And I think that we're extremely complex humans, and there are all sorts of things that define us outside of what we share with other people. A few years ago, I went to Jamaica with a few of my friends, and I arrived at the airport a few hours before they did, and I was sitting there, and some guy came up to me, and he started talking to me, and he had a horribly disfigured face. He'd actually been sitting on the beach and someone tried to rob him, and he had been shot through the jaw. His jaw had been completely blown off. And so I was sitting there, he was being really candid with me, and I finally got up the courage to ask him. I said, so every morning you wake up, you look at yourself in the mirror, and you're reminded of this horrible thing that happened to you. How do you cope with that? And he looked at me and he said, every morning I wake up and I look at myself in the mirror, I'm reminded of this terrible thing that happened to me. But I'm also reminded that what I care to share with everyone else, what they see, is only a fraction of the true person that I am. And I believe that that's true of all of us. And I believe that when technology and the internet come to reflect that truth, that the opportunity for self-improvement is going to be truly limitless. Thank you.